It's your boy Luke, back again with another Draftkings NFL video. This time we have our core picks here for the Week 5 main slate, and using our database approach, we're going to cover my favorite 6 plays at each position for the main slate contest. And real quickly, just before we hop into the picks, I wanted to remind you guys that we're going to have a live stream Sunday morning at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time, going over everything you need to know for this main slate, whether it be injuries, we can talk game theory, any live Q&A that you have. So make sure to stop on by while you're making your lineups for that slate, as well as with any questions you have for your season-long fantasy. Again, without further delay, let's get into the picks here for Week 5. So starting off with our quarterbacks, at number 6 we have Dak Prescott of the Dallas Cowboys. Relatively similar price tag to what we've seen for the rest of the year there at $6,900. A very juicy matchup against this Giants team, and on most slates we wouldn't consider this to be a juicy matchup, but a majority of the games for this main slate have low totals. There's only 2 games in the 50s in terms of over-under, and one of them is this Cowboys-Giants game. So do have Dak Prescott projected for 21.9 points, and again, it's a little bit of a sneaky matchup. A lot of people wouldn't consider this to be a high-volume matchup, but not only is it a great matchup in terms of the over-under, you also have a good matchup against this Giants secondary that's a little bit banged up, and obviously with CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper priced a little bit down this week for their prices, definitely makes them easier to fit into stacks. At number 5, we have Jameis Winston of the New Orleans Saints. At $5,600, he's a little bit of a value play here at quarterback. I also really like his chances to torch this Washington defense. So you can see how I'm projected for 19.2 points. In terms of a Vegas over-under, not one of the flashier games to try and target on this slate. But to this point, Jameis has been sneaky. He's been very efficient with that Saints offense. Hasn't put up a ton of touchdowns, a ton of yards, but on a per attempt basis is doing very well. Has also put his team in the red zone quite often. The only problem here is that Taysom Hill has vultured plenty of his touchdowns coming into the game. He's even thrown a few. And then obviously Alvin Kamara has put up a ton of production in the red zone. So at this point, Winston has done a really good job leading this offense. Just needs to capitalize more and actually score those touchdowns, which is definitely going to see some regression coming very soon. Has gone vultured a lot more than he should have to this point of the season. And if he goes out there and has even a remotely good game through the air, it's going to easily pay off that $5,600 price tag. At number 4, one of the poster boys for this video, that is Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles. Definitely one of the more expensive options at quarterback I'm targeting. They're at $7,000, but absolutely love this matchup with the Carolina Panthers. This is one of my favorite matchups to target on the entire slate. One of the few games approaching that 50-point over-under. And again, Jalen Hurts is the one-man show over there for the Eagles. Has been pretty much doing it all for them. Leads the team in rushing. Obviously, their passing leader. And has looked really good in fantasy as a result. And even in the games where he hasn't put up much production, has still eclipsed the 20-point mark. So has an extremely high floor. A lot of that is due to the rushing upside that he brings to the table. And again, the Panthers defense got absolutely lit up by the Cowboys last night. We've seen them get lit up time and time again. The only reason the Panthers are 3-1 into this point is because they have a great offense. So love stacking up this Eagle side of things and perhaps running it back with one of the wide receivers from Carolina. At number 3, we have Ryan Tannehill, who is somebody I touted last week. Didn't really have that breakthrough performance we were looking for. Kind of continued that bad run of play, but against a Jacksonville Jaguars defense that not only is the worst in the NFL against the pass, but is also dealing with a ton of leadership issues there with Urban Meyer. So they're going to be an absolute dumpster fire. So at $6,400, I love targeting Tannehill against that defense. Again, he's been off to a dreadful start, so not going to garner much ownership, but he's going to have A.J. Brown back, also likely Julio Jones, and with 2 of the best targets in the NFL back on the roster, I do expect him to play much better than he did against the Jets. At number 2, we have Kirk Cousins at $6,500. He's playing against the Lions, and this is actually a good matchup for me. I mean, the Lions have been a lot better on offense than people have expected, but have still been absolutely atrocious against the pass. And the Vikings have a high volume attack. They've also been relatively efficient to this point of the season, so I do expect them to dismantle this defense. He's also favorable for stacking because he's not an extremely expensive quarterback. Justin Jefferson is pretty expensive, but options like KJ Osborne, Tyler Conklin, make it a little bit more reasonable to stack up. So one of my favorite stacks of the week, especially in this divisional matchup and with 2 teams that don't really like each other. But at number one, this is a no-brainer play. He's also the most expensive quarterback on the slate, so it comes with a little bit of opportunity cost. But Kyler Murray at an even $8,000 is in a smash spot against the San Francisco 49ers. San Fran has been one of the worst defenses against the pass to this point, but also one of the worst defenses against the run. And we know that Kyler Murray brings a dual threat to the table. He's been absolutely electric to this point, nearly averaging 30 fantasy points a game. Not only is he going to improve on that, he has a really good defense to do it against. DeAndre Hopkins is finally returning to health, so all signs up for Kyler Murray in this matchup, and I'm more than willing to pay that $8,000 price tag. And now for our running backs. At number 6, we have Chase Edmonds, who is a little bit of a value play at $5,900, but has been off to a great start of the year here with the Arizona Cardinals, and somebody I like stacking up with Kyler Murray at that point. So as of right now, projected for 17.2 points, and again, a lot of his production to this point has come through the air. He's been by far the more utilized back out of the backfield, has also been somebody who's gone quite a few yards on the ground. So it hasn't just been James Conner who's been running the ball through the tackles. They've still gave Chase Edmonds quite a big share as well. I mean, to this point though, we have seen James Conner steal quite a few touchdowns, has been the goal line back, but for Chase Edmonds, somebody who's more than capable of taking a 30-40 yard rush to the house, it's just a matter of time before he has that ceiling game. He's just getting a ton of touches, and in this game where we have a very high over-under, the Cardinals are by far my highest projected team in terms of fantasy points on this slate. I absolutely love getting to people like Edmonds who just aren't getting the ownership they deserve. I mean, the guy's averaged over 16 fantasy points per game to this point, has always been relatively cheap, has always been in a good stacking situation with Murray because he gets a lot of his production through the air. So I absolutely love him as a play, especially if he remains low owned. At number 5, we have Najee Harris, who is probably the only bright spot for my Pittsburgh Steelers. At $6,900, he's definitely starting to get the respect of the price makers over there at Draftkings, but this matchup against the Broncos looks a lot worse on paper than it really is. The reason why the Broncos defense has looked so good against the run to this point is they've played from ahead a lot. They've been a very good team to this point. They're 3-1 record, and even in the game they lost, they weren't getting killed or beat for much of the game. So they've been playing from ahead, and as a result, teams haven't been able to run against them. So that's why we see the numbers as good, sorry, I should say as good as they are for them, but in reality, a lot of that is just due to volume. Again, Najee Harris, somebody who's very good out of the backfield as well, gives you a high floor in terms of fantasy production. And again, I expect the Steelers to win this game. They're the favorites in terms of the Vegas line. This doesn't have a massive over-under, but perhaps we finally see some good usage for Harris out of the backfield. I mean, the Steelers have been playing from behind. They haven't looked very good, so maybe we shouldn't count on that. But again, Najee Harris has still gotten it done in those instances, so it ends up being a little bit matchup-proof. At number 4, we have Miles Sanders, also another option for this Eagle team that I love using in stacks. I love pairing him with Hurts. You can even use him with Davante Smith or Dallas Goedert, or potentially even use all 4 of them together. Just a very good matchup against this Panthers defense, who not only lets up the most points of any team in the NFL, they do it pretty much all over the place. They're not good against the pass. They're not good against the run. So I do expect production for that team to come from all over the place. I mean, we saw Dak Prescott put up one of his best games of the year last year, so no question that Jalen Hurts could go out there and put up very similar numbers. I mean, Sanders is not only productive on the ground, he also does it through the air. So like the floor here, you can see at 17.5 projected points, ends up being one of my favorite plays at this position. And next up, we have Nick Chubb, who always pains me to write about, especially because he's a Cleveland Brown. But with this matchup against the Los Angeles Chargers, it's just irresistible. I have him projected for nearly 20 fantasy points, and at $6,700, that is more than a palatable enough price. And even though the Chargers were better than expected against the Raiders on Monday Night Football, a lot of that was against the pass. They had Derrick Carr really guessing. They were able to send pressure very effectively. But when the Raiders ended up running the ball, they looked very good. I mean, you had Jones over 5 yards per carry. You had Drake, who was very effective out of the backfield as a passer. And even though Chubb is off to a mediocre beginning to the season, I mean, we've seen Kareem Hunt steal quite a few points from Nick Chubb on this offense. I do expect it to turn around at some point. This Chargers team lets up some of the most points of any team in the NFL. They are top 5 in terms of opposing offenses going against them. And Nick Chubb is due for a huge game. I mean, the guy is capable of taking a 5-yard rush and turning it into a 75-yard rush on literally every carry. So if they end up getting ahead, that is the Browns, I do expect Chubb to have a massive game, somewhere in the line of 25 to 30 carries. And that's just something that we haven't seen to this point. That's why he is priced where he is. It's also why he's only garnering as much ownership as he is. So definitely like him as a sneaky option in that mid-tier price range. At number 2, we have Dalvin Cook, who we also wrote up last week. Obviously had a little bit of an injury, was inflamed towards the end of the week, so didn't end up being one of our core plays come Sunday. But at $8,400, now that he has a little bit more time to rest, I really love this matchup against the Detroit Lions. So just like I like Kirk Cousins, I do expect the Detroit team to just get lit up here. I mean, this Vikings offense, one of the highest volume teams in the NFL, also extremely concentrated. They essentially only pour the usage between 4 guys, those being Dalvin Cook, with Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson, and now KJ Osborne. They sprinkle in a little bit of Tyler Conklin, but that's about it. They're one of the few teams that doesn't really sub in wide receivers. They don't use their backup tight end, that sort of thing. So that's why you see such massive scores from these guys. So have him projected right now for 23.9 points. And again, while he had a quiet week 4, he was hampered by injury. They played Alexander Madison quite a bit. They also threw the ball a lot more often because he was a little bit sluggish. So expect him with his legs under him in a cupcake matchup to have a huge bounce back. In our number 1 pick, we have Derrick Henry, who was the number 1 option last week. Pretty much ended up paying it off, but this matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars is just too juicy to pass up. I mean, I love Ryan Tannehill in this matchup. I also love Derrick Henry just because we expect them to absolutely smash the Jaguars. I mean, the point spread in this matchup right now is approaching 10 points for the Titans, and even after I lost to the Jets. So that just tells you the kind of aura that they have behind this Jaguars team right now. And again, much like his matchup against the Jets, I'm expecting a ton of usage. I have him projected right now for 28 carries, over 25 fantasy points, and this is just a smash play. Something where if you have that $9,000 to spend, you 100% should be playing Derrick Henry. It's just a little bit of opportunity cost spending up to that $9,000 mark, but we do have quite a few good value plays on this slate. So definitely somebody that I'm filling into my lineups right around the 30 to 40% mark in terms of exposure. I just wanted to quickly remind you guys of my NFL Patreon page that I launched just last week. Just like my PGA Tour projections, it's just $1 for the month, and you get access to my projections for every player on this week's slate. You not only get projections for the main slate, but also for every showdown slate, my ownership numbers, you get access to the GS Sleuth Community Discord, all of that again for just $1 a month. So make sure to check the link in the description for that. And now for our wide receivers. At number 6, we have a fixture here on the GS Luke channel, that being Antonio Brown at $5,200. And right there, that is a great price tag. We're used to seeing him priced right around $6,000, and after a solid week, he sees a price discount, which I don't really understand. Perhaps it's a little bit of a tough matchup against this Dolphins defense, but not something I'm worried about with the GOAT throwing him the ball. So at 16.9 projected points, he becomes a great point per dollar play there in that $5,000 range. He's been a fixture of this picks, a lot because of the rapport that he has with Tom Brady. He gets a ton of targets on that team. He's playing that slot wide receiver role. And when Tom Brady really needs to make a play, he's looking Antonio Brown's way. I mean, a lot of people would have expected that to be Chris Godwin, potentially even Mike Evans, but that has not been the case to this point. You just go ahead and take a look at the last 2-minute drills that Tom Brady's been implementing and tell me that he's not looking Antonio Brown's way every single time. So again, he's much cheaper than he should be. I look at him as the wide receiver 1 on this team rather than a lot of times the number 3 priced wide receiver on this team. And again, while the matchup against the Dolphins isn't one of the better matchups on the slate, the price tag is just much too low on him. So definitely like him as a core play here in this matchup. At number 5, we have Deontay Johnson, who has an absolute ancient man throwing the ball there with Big Ben. Don't know what's happened to him. I mean, his arm just looks like he needs Tommy John surgery or something. It's rough, but at $6,500, Johnson still has more than enough firepower to take that down. So I'm projected at an even 20 points right now, and he's essentially QB proof. He's somebody who runs a lot of those short routes, lots of screens, and in large part, a lot of his production comes from his PPR production. Usually gets right around the 7 to 8 catches per game mark. Is definitely, with the added game this year, going to put up maybe 125, 130 catches this year. So somebody who, again, is a little bit QB proof for that reason. And again, this Broncos matchup, one of the sneakier matchups on the slate because the Broncos have been very good on offense to this point. And again, while the Steelers have been absolutely dreadful, they do have an absolute ton of talent on that offense. And I wouldn't be surprised if they went out there, were able to put up 20, maybe even 30 points in a game sometime soon. And in PPR formats, I absolutely love Diontae Johnson this week. And number 4, we have Devonta Smith of the Philadelphia Eagles, who is a little bit more expensive than I'd like at $5,900, but with that kind of price tag, perhaps he comes in a little bit lower owned than he should. So at 17.8 points, I absolutely love stacking him up with Jalen Hurts, potentially even with Dallas Goedert as well. And he's somebody who has a great rapport with Hurts. Again, they played together in college at Alabama. They were pretty good in college as well. Devonta Smith as a rookie for that team as a freshman was unbelievable. So you've seen that rapport to this point of the year. Anytime it's third down or there's a key play, he's always looking Devonta Smith's way. So with this Panthers defense, one of the softer matchups that we have here on this slate. Definitely like going to Smith, even if he's a little bit overpriced for my liking. At number 3, we have Brandon Cooks, who at $6,100 is the opposite of overpriced. This guy is completely being overlooked at this point, has sneakily been one of the best wide receivers in the NFL in terms of his fantasy production. And in large part, it's just because of circumstance. There's just no one else there in the Texans offense who's even remotely capable of putting up the type of numbers that Cooks is. And as the lone bright spot for this offense, I'm fine going to it all year. I mean, he's going to go out there, get you 78 catches every single game. I mean, to this point, at least 80 yards in every single game. And he has by far the most touchdown production of anyone on this team. And even with Davis Mills at quarterback, who threw 5 interceptions last week, Cooks still ended up paying off the salary. So somebody who is almost just like Diontae Johnson there, QB proof. And I'm going to be riding this hot hand, especially at this type of price tag for the rest of the year. And at number 2, we have CeeDee Lamb, who's $100 more expensive than Brandon Cooks. You can see the projections almost identical right there. And somebody I love pairing up with Dak Prescott in that juicy matchup against the Giants. And again, this is a sneaky game to target. It has the second highest over-under of any game on this main slate. And he gets a little bit of a price decrease, which doesn't make sense to me. This guy was nearly $7,000 last week, had a very good week. And even though this Giants secondary is banged up, they are pretty decent. So perhaps it's a little bit to do with the matchup. But at $6,200 and nearly a 20-point projection, he still remains one of the best point per dollar plays on the entire slate. Obviously, if it were a bit of a softer matchup, we'd be looking at a 22, potentially even 23-point projection, and he would be a smash play at that point, but still winds up being my number 2 prediction on the slate. But at number 1, we have Davante Adams, and again, just like Derrick Henry here, guys, it's a no-brainer play. If you have the salary, go ahead and grab Davante Adams, but it comes with some opportunity cost there at $8,200. The matchup against the Bengals isn't the best on the slate, but it's a top 5 matchup. So you see him there projected at 22.7 points. And not only is the defense young and inexperienced, but now they're banged up. They had a tough divisional matchup against the Jaguars and the Steelers the week prior. And in both games, they ended up getting pretty hurt. I mean, they had a lot of guys going down with stingers. They had quite a few guys going down with cramps and whatnot. And overall, they don't really look like they're in great shape. Perhaps their training camp wasn't as intense as it needed to be, that sort of thing. It's going to take them a few weeks to get up to speed. So while they're playing from behind, while they're not completely there defensively, I'm going to target them, right? So guys like Robert Tonyan, who we're going to get to here in a second, Davante Adams, potentially even Aaron Rodgers in stacking situations, are in a very good position to pay off this week. It could be argued that Adams is still too cheap as well. So I did say that at $8,200, it comes with opportunity cost, but perhaps it should be even higher, right? This is somebody who is by and far the best wide receiver, best player at his position. And it could be argued that he could be priced $9,000 or even above, just like Derrick Henry. And now let's wrap it up with our tight ends. At number 6, we have Hunter Henry. And while the whole sports world was focused on Tom Brady's return to New England, I was completely enthralled with Mac Jones and how he handled himself in that type of situation. Was very impressive. Somebody who, at the beginning of the year, I thought would be an all-right quarterback going forward, but at this point, I do think that he eventually becomes a star quarterback in the NFL. And as a result, guys like Hunter Henry, the wide receivers on that team like Kendrick Bourne, Jacoby Myers, are going to get a ton of momentum as the year goes on. They're going to start to get more and more production. I think by the time fantasy playoff comes around, they are extremely viable starters. So at $3,700, I look to buy in a little bit early on Hunter Henry. have him projected right now for 14.2 points against this horrible defense. And again, one of the keys to success in that game against Tampa Bay was using his tight ends. Mac Jones was throwing the ball when he had to. When they sent pressure, he was looking for his safety valve. So Hunter Henry, even though it's a much softer matchup this week, Mac Jones isn't necessarily going to have to worry about tons of blitzing or anything like that. He showed a lot of confidence in Hunter Henry, obviously hit him for a touchdown, and at that $3,700 price tag is much easier to pay off than some of his counterparts. At number 5, we have Cameron Brate, who's even cheaper than Hunter Henry, also filling in for Rob Gronkowski, who's likely not to play this week with his punctured lung. The matchup against this Dolphins team isn't great, but at 13.8 projected points, all he really has to do is go out there, get you a touchdown, and he's going to do more than enough to pay it off. Again, it may seem a little bit tougher on paper than it is in reality. If there's any strength to this Miami defense, it is their safeties and their cornerbacks. So for Cameron Brate, going to be able to avoid that, likely going to be covered by a middle linebacker, and that's a weakness of that team. They're a little bit of better tacklers, but tend to struggle in terms of their coverage. So Cameron Brate, a great matchup. Again, on paper, it doesn't really look that way, but when we take a look into their position players, especially the guys that will be matched up against him, he seems to have an advantage no matter who they put on him. At number 4, we have Robert Tonyan, who at $4,300 is also somebody I like using against this inexperienced Bengals defense, perhaps even more so than Davante Adams. Again, with Davante Adams, it's a little bit more expensive than I would like him to be. If he was $7,500 or something like that, he'd be much easier to fit into lineups. I also like the fact that Tonyan is going to be covered by those young linebackers. They have a few studs over there. They have Zach Wilson, who for this Bengals team is causing a lot of issues, but he's more of a pass rusher. He's not going to be put on Robert Tonyan, so as a result, do expect him to have a huge advantage in terms of his matchup. He's extremely athletic. He's good after the catch, so 15.1 projected points is more than enough to pay off that mid $4,000 price tag. And again, he hasn't gotten off to the best start this year, right? He was a little bit red zone dependent there in 2020. I tried to give you guys a little bit of caution about that, more than half of his fantasy points came via the touchdown. But when the touchdowns start coming back on the board, you want to be there, especially for DFS formats. At number 3, we have Dallas Goedert at $5,100. Again, somebody I love targeting against this Panthers defense. You can see projected for more points than Robert Tonyan at 15.8, and just love him as a stacking option, right? If this game's going to end up being a shootout, a 70-point total or that kind of thing, you're going to need Goedert because he gets by far the most targets of anyone on this team. He's actually been targeted more than Devontae Smith to this point. And at $5,100, it's a fair price point, right? He's getting priced up for the matchup. Goedert's also being priced up for his recent production, but that's fair. And as a result, I do expect his ownership to be a little bit lower than it should be, right? There's a little bit of sticker shock with that price tag, but I'm definitely willing to pay that in this great matchup. But at number 2, we have TJ Hawkinson, who's almost certainly going to be chalk. Again, he's only $400 more expensive than Goedert, so a lot of people are going to see that $400 difference, change one of their defenses, and make this change. And to be honest with you, I couldn't blame you, right? You get an additional 1.2 projected points between the two. You also get a very good matchup against this Minnesota Vikings defense. My only issue with that swap is just ownership, right? With Goedert, you're going to get maybe 5 to 6 times less ownership. So just something you're going to need to consider with your lineup, especially with the rest of the composition and how chalky your other plays are. I really like the rapport that TJ's shown with Goff to this point. Obviously, Goff loved targeting Tyler Higbee over there in LA, and it looks like Hawkinson is this guy over here in Detroit, and perhaps an even better version of Higbee, right? Somebody who is a better blocker, is more athletic, has more sure hands. So again, Higbee was a very good option over there in LA. Now that he has an even more athletic version, I expect him to have a very good year, and this is a very good position for him to continue to do that. But at number 1, this is the guy who, I said this before, guys, if Darren Waller is on the slate, he's going to be the number 1 tight end, I guarantee you. You probably can't price this guy high enough for him to not be worth it. You'd have to be above $8,000 for me to even consider not playing him. The matchup against the Bears isn't ideal. I mean, they're one of the better defenses in the NFL, but still have Waller projected for nearly 20 fantasy points. Again, like I said, the clear number 1 tight end. He's one of the best wide receivers, period, in the NFL. I mean, if you put this guy at the wide receiver position, he'd probably be a $7,800 wide receiver. I mean, probably only behind Davante Adams, Tyreek Hill, that kind of thing. Right now, he is number 1 in targets at tight end. It's not even close. If we take a look at targets, period, he's top 5 in the NFL in targets. Extremely efficient with them, a red zone threat. It's just a no-brainer pick here, right? So just like Davante Adams, just like Derrick Henry, if you have this salary, definitely recommend going to Darren Waller. That's all I've got for the Week 5 main slate picks. Go ahead and let me know down in the comments who you have as your favorite team to stack on the slate. I mean, for me, it's definitely going to be that Philadelphia Eagles team. I really like Jalen Hurts and his floor as a rusher. I also like pairing him up with guys like Dallas Goedert and Davante Smith. So go ahead and let me know down in the comments who you have as your favorite stack and why. Would love to get some of that debate going. As always, guys, I really appreciate you guys stopping by and viewing the video. If you guys haven't already liked the video and subscribed to the channel, make sure you guys go ahead and do so. Throughout the week, we're going to have even more NFL content dropping. We're going to have my value plays, we're going to have my fades and sleepers, and of course, the Sunday live stream at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. So I hope to see you guys there. Until then, good luck, and I'll see you guys on Sunday.